team wrestling, Wilbur Snyder and his partner, the man with the cast iron stomach, Pepper Gomez. And on Saturday, August 31st, gentlemen.
The story of how Wilbur Snyder ended up becoming friends with guys he once brawled with is as wild and interesting as wrestling gets. Whether it was his fiery rivalry with Dick the Bruiser or the intense battles with Vern Gier, these feuds had fans hooked more than anything else. So let's dive in and find out how all that bad blood somehow turned into real respect and even friendship. Let's kick things off with one of the most surprising twists in wrestling history: how Wilbur Snyder, known for his technical skill and quiet professionalism, became close friends with the same guys he was supposed to hate inside the ring. And the story starts strong with none other than Dick the Bruiser. Now, if you were around the Midwest wrestling scene back in the day, you already know that the name Dick the Bruiser meant chaos, fists flying, and fans screaming. He was wild, loud, and a total brawler. On the other hand, Wilbur Snyder was calm, calculated, and one of the best technical wrestlers of his time. These two couldn't have been more different in style, personality, or even appearance. But that's what made their rivalry so legendary. Their feud wasn't just for show, it looked and felt real. Fans in cities like Detroit and Chicago would pack the arenas just to see these two tear into each other. And they didn't disappoint. One of their most memorable showdowns was a brutal Texas death match in Denver. The match lived up to the name. It was violent, raw, and exactly the kind of battle that had fans talking for weeks. On the surface, it seemed like they hated each other with a passion. But behind the curtain, these two were actually longtime friends and even business partners. Yep, that's the twist most people don't see coming. While they were going to war in the ring, outside of it, Wilbur Snyder and Dick the Bruiser were co-owners of the World Wrestling Association in Indianapolis. Imagine that, going toe-to-toe with someone in front of thousands of screaming fans, and then sitting next to them in a business meeting the very next day. It sounds crazy, but that's the magic of professional wrestling, and it speaks volumes about the respect these men had for each other. Their partnership in the WWA wasn't just for show either. They both took their roles seriously. Snyder, being more soft-spoken and humble, often stepped back from the spotlight. Even though he was more than capable of carrying the main event, he frequently allowed Bruiser to take center stage. Snyder knew that sometimes the bigger picture, the success of the whole promotion, was more important than his own individual fame. It's rare in wrestling to see someone with that kind of mindset, especially when so many promoters and wrestlers of that era were all about pushing themselves to the top. But Snyder was different. He didn't need to be the loudest guy in the room to make an impact. Even when he wasn't in the main event, Snyder was putting on quality matches. Whether he was in the mid-card or working in tag teams, he delivered every single time. Fans respected him for his consistency and honesty in the ring. He wasn't flashy, but he was reliable, and he knew how to make his opponents look good too. That's part of why his feud with Dick the Bruiser worked so well, because fans believed it. They could feel the intensity, the contrast, the realness of it all, and yet both men were able to keep that professional line clear, never letting business or ego get in the way of their friendship or their shared goals. But Dick the Bruiser wasn't the only big name that Snyder had an unforgettable rivalry with. Enter Vern Gier, another giant of the sport. Gier, much like Snyder, was known for his technical style and sharp wrestling mind. He was also a future promoter, running the AWA and building it into a powerhouse in the wrestling world. But before all that, he and Snyder had some serious business inside the ring. One of their most famous moments came in 1956, when Wilbur Snyder did something not many thought possible. He ended Vern Gier's 5-year reign as the NWA United States Champion in Detroit. That was a huge deal at the time. Gier had been a dominant force, and Snyder stepping up and beating him clean made headlines across the wrestling world. Their matches weren't about brawling or blood. They were technical masterpieces, two highly skilled wrestlers putting on clinics night after night, showing fans a different kind of wrestling, and people loved it. Their rivalry helped raise the level of wrestling in the Midwest. It showed that you didn't always need chaos and chairs flying to draw a crowd. Sometimes pure wrestling skill was enough. And just like with Dick the Bruiser, Snyder and Gier had a mutual respect that went beyond the ring. They may have been rivals during matches, but they respected each other's craft and commitment to the sport. Snyder's approach to wrestling, both as a performer and a promoter, was all about balance. He knew how to play the villain or the hero, how to be a fierce opponent one night and a respected businessman the next. That's not easy to do in any industry, let alone professional wrestling, where emotions run high and egos often clash. But Snyder did it with class. His willingness to put the company first, even if it meant taking a step back personally, earned him a ton of respect from everyone in the business. While others might have hogged the spotlight or booked themselves as unbeatable champions, Snyder was more focused on building a strong product, a promotion that fans could believe in. He was the glue that held things together behind the scenes, even if the audience never knew it. All right, now let's turn our attention to what really made Wilbur Snyder stand out: his performances in the ring. Back in 1953, during the football offseason, Snyder decided to give wrestling a try. He had been playing professional football, but there was something about wrestling that drew him in. He began training in Southern California under two respected names in the business: Sandor Sabo and Warren Bockwinkel. Both were veterans who saw potential in Snyder right away. It didn't take long for him to realize that wrestling could be more than just a side gig. It could be his full-time calling. By 1954, he hung up his cleats and fully committed to wrestling. One of the things that made Snyder stand out right from the start was how he brought his football background into the ring. He didn't just leave that part of his life behind, he used it. His matches often included football-style moves and takedowns, and that unique style got people talking. He wasn't just another tough guy in trunks, he was doing something different, something fans hadn't really seen before. That helped him get national attention pretty quickly. And Snyder didn't waste any time making his mark. Before he even hit the big time in the US, he had already been a regional champion up in Montreal. But his breakthrough moment came on April 7th, 1956, at Marigold Arena in Chicago. That night, he did what few had done. He defeated Vern Gier, one of the top stars of the era, and captured the United States Championship. It was a big deal. Gier had been on a tear, and for Snyder to beat him clean was a sign that he was a major player now. Fans were starting to take notice of the man being billed as the world's most scientific wrestler. That nickname wasn't just for show either. Snyder had a methodical, technical approach to wrestling. He wasn't flashy, but every move had a purpose. He studied his opponents, broke them down piece by piece, and found weaknesses to exploit. He was the kind of wrestler who made it all look real, and that's because he treated it like a sport. His success didn't stop in Chicago. Snyder went on to hold championships in a wide range of territories affiliated with the National Wrestling Alliance. Back then, the wrestling world wasn't one giant company. It was a patchwork of regional promotions, and Snyder was a big name in many of them. One of his most impressive wins came on November 15, 1958, when he once again defeated Vern Gier, this time in Omaha, Nebraska, for a version of the world title. Beating a guy like Gier twice in two different major cities really showed just how good Snyder was. Now, we've already talked about how Snyder and Dick the Bruiser became business partners, but let's take a closer look at how that happened. After promoter Jim Barnett left the Indianapolis territory, Snyder and Bruiser saw an opportunity. On April 27, 1965, they officially bought into the territory and created what became known as Championship Wrestling, Inc. Interestingly, they didn't list themselves publicly as the owners. Instead, Snyder's wife Shirley was listed as the registered agent, and Bruiser's mother, M.A. Johnston, was listed as a director. This was done to keep their ownership quiet and behind the scenes. It was a smart move that gave them more control without drawing unwanted attention. Even while managing the business, Snyder never stepped away from the ring. In fact, he kept building his resume. In September 1967, he beat Mitsu Arakawa and added the WWA World Heavyweight title to his growing list of achievements. That win kicked off a 2-year run as champion, an impressive feat by any standard. Between 1956 and 1962, Snyder also won the United States Championship 10 times. That's not a typo. 10 times. He was consistently at the top of the card in multiple territories, proving over and over that he could draw a crowd and deliver a strong match. Of course, no great wrestler's career is complete without some unforgettable rivalries. We've already touched on his feuds with Dick the Bruiser and Vern Gier, but there was another name that gave Snyder some serious competition: Hans Schmidt. Schmidt was known for his vicious style and villainous character, and the battles between him and Snyder were intense. Fans loved it because Snyder was the calm technician, facing off against Schmidt's brutal, win-at-all-costs approach. It was a classic contrast that never got old. Snyder was also a standout in tag team wrestling. Over the course of his career, he held the WWA Tag Team Championship a total of 13 times. That kind of success doesn't happen by accident. It shows that Snyder knew how to work well with others, adapt to different partners, and play to the crowd, whether he was in a solo match or working as part of a team. And speaking of teams, one of Snyder's more international accomplishments came during a tour of Japan in 1969. He teamed up with Danny Hodge, another wrestling legend, and the two captured the NWA International Tag Team titles in the Japan Pro Wrestling Alliance. Wrestling overseas was a huge honor back then, and it showed how much respect Snyder had earned around the world. Even decades after his prime, Snyder's influence stuck around. He was often introduced as the world's most scientific wrestler, and that wasn't just hype. He brought a level of skill and precision that inspired generations to come. On Bret Hart's Greatest Hits video, WWE legends Bobby the Brain, Heenan, and Macho Man, Randy Savage both mentioned Snyder by name. Heenan even joked that Snyder practically invented the abdominal stretch, a move that became a signature in technical wrestling. Jim Ross, one of the most iconic wrestling commentators of all time, also kept Snyder's name alive for years. Anytime a wrestler used the abdominal stretch during the late 90s or early 2000s, Ross would throw in the line, "Shades of the late Wilbur Snyder." That little nod might have flown over the heads of newer fans, but for those who knew their wrestling history, it was a tribute to one of the true technicians of the game. So when you look at Snyder's career, it's clear that he wasn't just a great wrestler, he was a pioneer. He brought football into the ring. He helped run a wrestling territory without stealing the spotlight. He earned titles across the country and overseas. And most importantly, he left a legacy that lived on long after he stepped away from the ring. And that wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit like and subscribe so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.